The strangest thing about most digital twins is that the glossy interface is the least important part. The hard part is whether the twin deserves authority when the world is only partially observed. By 2026, most deployed digital twins are still narrow, and that is not a failure. They tend to model industrial assets, factories, buildings, logistics networks, vehicles, and sometimes city systems. Climate and weather models fit here too, along with patient cohorts and robotic simulation environments. What remains immature is the dream version, a general cross-domain world model that reliably connects physics, operations, people, and institutions. A useful twin is an executable representation of reality that keeps updating. That word, executable, matters. The moment a model can influence maintenance schedules, grid dispatch, clinical workflows, or autonomous motion, it stops being analytics. It becomes part of operations. That is where observability, causal fidelity, and governance stop being nice to have and become safety requirements. Start with the first high-impact finding. Telemetry discipline creates more value than dashboards. A live twin is only as good as its measurements and clocks. Sensor placement matters. Calibration matters. Time synchronization matters. Network latency matters. Even the identity and provenance of each telemetry stream matters. If those are weak, the model may look complete and behave confidently, while quietly drifting away from reality. So a practical capital allocation rule emerges. Fund sensors, calibration, missingness handling, and resilient ingestion before you fund visualization layers. A visually perfect model built on sparse or contaminated data produces false precision. In an operational setting, false precision is worse than admitted uncertainty because it invites overconfidence. The second finding is architectural, and it is counterintuitive for teams raised on end-to-end machine learning. The best twins are rarely one model. They are a coupled system of models, each with a job. You may separate a geometric model from a physics model. You may separate control logic from an economic model. You may need a human process model, a cyber state model, and a governance model, all interacting. Collapsing everything into one monolith can make the system brittle, expensive, and hard to validate. This leads to a critical boundary choice. Where do you pay for high-fidelity simulation, and where do you choose task-specific abstraction? Over-detailed twins can become too slow and too costly to update. They can also fail in surprising ways because they encode assumptions that break under regime change. Under-detailed twins can look stable, but they may create false confidence when conditions shift. That takes us to the third finding. Causal fidelity is the real constraint. A twin must distinguish correlation, causal mechanism, and operationally useful prediction. In domains where governing equations are known, physics-informed machine learning can help. It integrates data-driven components with physical constraints, like conservation laws, structural limits, heat transfer, or fluid dynamics. That is especially valuable when operating conditions move outside the historical data range. But many of the most important domains do not have settled equations. Social systems, policy systems, and much of biology have partial, contested, or shifting causal structure. In those settings, the validation burden must rise, not fall. If a model influences welfare decisions, policing, public health interventions, or critical infrastructure, explainability and auditability are not optional user interface features. They are governance controls. A twin also has to survive regime changes. Climate extremes, supply chain shocks, sensor outages, demographic shifts, disease reclassification, equipment aging, and adversarial manipulation all push systems outside their training comfort zone. You want to know in advance what the model does when the world stops looking familiar. The fourth finding is about multi-model governance, and it comes from an unexpected place. Climate science is ahead of most industries in coordinating multiple models. The Coupled Model Intercomparison Project, in its sixth phase, CMIP6, provides a working precedent. It shows structured intercomparison, experiment design, versioning discipline, and model family governance. In plain terms, it is a way to compare models honestly under shared scenarios and to document why they diverge. That pattern should spread. Infrastructure planning, energy systems, defense logistics, and even health systems can borrow the ensemble mindset. When stakes are high, you often want multiple models that disagree in visible ways, rather than one model that hides uncertainty. A model monoculture can create institutional blind spots because everyone inherits the same assumptions and the same failure modes. Now the fifth finding, and it is becoming urgent. Synthetic reality is a trust problem before it is a simulation problem. Twins increasingly rely on generated data, simulated scenarios, reconstructed states, and counterfactual branches. Synthetic environments will be routine for training robots, training operators, and stress testing plans. That is plausible, and in many cases desirable. Yet synthetic content has to be labeled, governed, retained, and sometimes excluded from future training loops. Uncontrolled recursion, where generated data contaminates measurement records, can create model drift. It can also create artificial consensus, where the system starts agreeing with itself because it is feeding on its own outputs. When that happens, uncertainty can collapse quietly. Right when you need it most. There is also an evidentiary question. A synthetic scenario can be extremely useful for stress testing. It is not by itself evidence that an event is likely. Procurement, insurance, safety cases, and courts will need clearer rules about what synthetic scenarios can and cannot justify. So the trust infrastructure must distinguish categories that humans can understand under time pressure. Observed telemetry is one thing, inferred state is another, predicted state is another, simulated counterfactuals are another, generated media is another. Without those boundaries, operators and institutions can lose the ability to audit reality. Everything so far points to the central governance issue. Authority tiers matter more than interface quality. Ask what the twin can recommend, what it can execute, and what requires institutional approval. That boundary defines whether the system is advisory, supervisory, semi-autonomous, or command-authorized. Each step upward should trigger a higher validation burden, stronger audit logs, and tighter rollback procedures. Ownership also becomes complicated. Who owns the model state, the telemetry stream, derived inferences, and counterfactual histories? The answer changes depending on whether you are modeling an industrial asset, a building, a city system, a human body, or a population. Consent constraints are not implementation details, especially in care settings. Adoption and legitimacy can limit what is measurable and what should remain unmeasured for privacy and ethics. Security sits underneath all of it. Treat telemetry as an attack surface. A twin can be compromised without anyone hacking the final model, simply by manipulating upstream sensors, firmware, gateways, or time servers. Model update channels are also targets. So are operator interfaces. In a world where model outputs can trigger physical commands, identity and command integrity become central design requirements. That implies separation of powers inside the system. Telemetry ingestion should not share credentials with model retraining. Scenario publication should not share authority with physical actuation. Independent approvals reduce the chance that one compromised component becomes total control. Long horizon leaders also have to plan for cryptographic transition. Infrastructure lasts decades. Security assumptions do not. Command channels and provenance records need cryptographic agility, so a twin remains trustworthy across the asset's lifetime. Finally, keep a non-model fallback. When model confidence drops, telemetry fails, or adversarial conditions appear, the system should degrade gracefully. Twin failure should reduce capability, not erase operational control. If you want one practical takeaway for capital allocation and strategy, it is this. Before any twin touches safety, rights, or critical infrastructure, require provenance, uncertainty reporting, audit logs, and explicit authority boundaries, because the real product is trusted decision-making.